My guest today is the lead guitarist and main songwriter for progressive metal group Redemption, who have a brand new album out called The Art of Loss. I'd like to welcome Nick Van Dyke.
Hey, how are you?
Pleasure to speak with you.
Pleasure to speak with you. You know, it's people occasionally ask me, "Oh, you've got this cancer diagnosis in your family and your career, and how do you do it?" And I think we're seeing today that it's not very easy. I'm run behind a lot of times, so I apologize for the delay, but I'm happy to speak with you.
I want to talk a little bit about the things that do make you so busy, and I want to get to that a little bit, but let's jump into the new album, the new Redemption album.
Yes.
Art of Loss, your first since 2011. Tell us a story about the time sort of in between albums and what brought you guys back.
Sure. Well, it's funny. We had gotten into a rhythm of releasing a record every couple of years, and it never seemed for a minute that we weren't busy, because we finished touring in support of Mortal Coil. It took a long time to get our, for whatever reason, we always have a variety of interesting malfunctions that occur, leaving aside biology for a minute. And, as an example, when we were recording Mortal Coil, the studio that our producer picked in Chicago to reamp our leads was literally struck by lightning and power blew out for 3 days. So that's the type of thing that just occasionally happens to us. And we had hard drive issues and file conversion issues and all sorts of Final Cut Pro issues and issues after issues with that live DVD, so it took quite some time to get that finished. By the time that was done, I was into writing, but Ray does have this other little band called Fate's Warning,
Right.
and they've been very active, so he was touring in support of, first it was recording and then touring in support of Darkness in a Different Light, which I think is a fabulous record. So we managed eventually to have everything coalesce, and once Ray was back and I was able to focus on this without worrying about that live album anymore, it actually moved relatively quickly. So, and then, unfortunately, we were also delayed by the tragedy of what happened to Bernie. Didn't slow us down that much. It took us it happened while I was writing the music, and by the time we were ready to do leads, it was evident to us that Bernie wasn't going to be able to do it. So once we decided that we were going to need guests, it took a couple of months to figure out who we were going to use and when we were going to be able to use them. You can't just call Marty Friedman and have him, record something the next day. It takes weeks to schedule. So that played a part, but not a major part. And then by the time, the last factor, I guess, would be we were rushed on the last album from the time we entered the studio to the time we got released, because we had scheduled tour dates and we needed something to sell at the show. And, it's always a good idea to tour in support of an album that's been released as opposed to one that's not going to be released until 2 months after your tour's done. Right. So this time we wanted to do it the right way, which was to deliver the album, have a minute to take a breath, let the label plan the release schedule, get some long lead press, and this is why we were able to do a video time to the release and a lyric video and have the rollout the way we've done it. So that probably added a little bit of time. So between all those factors, it wound up taking us 3.5 years from the release of our last product, which was the live DVD. I don't want to take that long again, but that's where we were and what we were doing.
And, did some of it play into signing with Metal Blade as your new label, sort of getting that situated?
Not as much as you might think. The Inside Out guys were great. We had a really good association with them. I did 3 terrific records together, and I have nothing but nice words to say about them. And it wasn't a contentious departure. Our contract was up, and we were starting to talk with them about what might come next. And I've known the Metal Blade family for a long time socially, and I try not to impose upon friends. So I deliberately not really approached them in the past. But Tracy Vera, Joey Vera's wife, who's a very senior person at the label, is a friend, and she came to me and said, if you're thinking of, when your contract's up, come talk to us, because, she and a couple other people there are big fans of our music. And, Metal Blade is a phenomenal label, one of the iconic labels in the history of heavy music. And, they're very, very, very good at what they do. And they operate in a different world than most of the rest of the indies. So I can already tell that the scope of what they're able to accomplish is greater than a lot of other companies, and hopefully that'll translate into us getting a little bit more exposure and connecting with a few more fans.
Yeah, it seems like it'd be a good fit with your
So
music
far,
and
so
what you
good.
do. Yeah.
We're not, grindcore people that are going to be touring with cattle decapitation, but I think there's a home for us on the label nonetheless.
One of the best band names ever, I think. So, album comes out this Friday, February
It's today.
26th.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, that's right. It is today. Does the title have a specific meaning? Is the album about loss, coming from something, or sort of that general
It's funny.
vibe of writing?
There is a pattern to it that was not premeditated necessarily. I can't remember if I had the song idea or the idea of using it for the title first. I think I had the song written first because we were kicking around "Hope Dies Last" as a possible title, and I think and maybe I had "Days End" as a possible title. But I remember the conversation I had with Ray. I'm like, "What do you think about calling the record "The Art of Loss"?" And he paused for a minute and he goes, "I don't know. It's kind of bleak." But it's heavy metal. We're not going
right.
to, as I've said, we're not going to sing about unicorns. Only Rhapsody does that. So it's consistent with our music, which is a little bit melancholic. There's a fundamental positivity to usually the way our records resolve, but the human condition is one that's fragile and one that is if there's a theme to the record, it's that living life the way it's meant to be lived inevitably involves some pain, and learning to contextualize that and grow from it rather than let it destroy you is critical to leading a healthy life. And that if you make decisions not out of fear of losing something, but out of love for whatever that decision is, whether it's a career move or a family move or a friendship or a relationship, it's that leads to a more healthy engagement with yourself and the world around you. So that's a bunch of psychobabble gobbledygook, but that's kind of what the record's about.
That's perfect. I'm always fascinated by bands that started a little while ago, before kind of the end of the record business, as they call it.
The utter collapse of the music business.
Exactly. And it has an effect on the money that goes into an album, how you record. You don't have a studio that you live in for a month. So how has that changed for you guys? Are you guys emailing files and recording via cross country, or has it changed along those lines?
No, because when we got into it, there wasn't a whole lot of money in it to begin with, and we were, we're never going to be Bon Jovi, we're never going to be Iron Maiden. So we're an obscure band in an obscure genre of music to begin with, where really Dream Theater and I guess Symphony X are kind of exceptions to the rule. Queensryche is sort of its own animal, even before the curious events of the last several years. So there aren't a lot of bands that make our type of music that are anything more than small bands to begin with, and there's never been a lot of money in being a small band. But and so from the beginning, particularly when we were even smaller and hadn't yet sort of broken, which kind of happened around in two phases, when Ray joined and then when we toured on the next record with Dream Theater, we never really had a lot of money, never really got big advances, and always had to record, not quite guerrilla style, but making use of what we had rather than going out and spending a lot of money. So that hasn't really changed. I have a home studio. We typically track everything except drums in that home studio. What has happened over the years is I've gotten better equipment. So the guitar sound is better on this record than anything we've done, and that's not by accident. It's because I bought a bunch of great equipment that works in the particular recording environment that we use. But, generally speaking, the recording process has been, certainly since Fullness, has been pretty similar. I write the stuff, I send very rough versions of it, which may or may not have a rough bass line and may or may not have, melodies sung to nonsense lyrics like la, 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 la. Right. And people will give me notes on it. I'll tweak it. I'll send it back out. And then if people like what they hear, then I'll do final guitar parts, final keyboard parts. We'll bring in the bass. It's a tough job for our drummer because he comes last and he has to play pretty perfectly in time to the click track. And then we'll bring in Ray because, like all lead singers, he wants to have everything else done before he steps into the booth. So, but it would be different if we had unlimited time and unlimited money. But this is this is how we've settled into doing it, and it seems to work.
The style of the album is the usual style you guys are known for. hard hitting rock and stuff. There is the 22-minute epic at the end, at Day's End, that you referred to, which is killer, and also a surprising cover of a Who classic. So why'd you choose that song to do?
So we've always tried to do, even back to our self-titled original quasi demo release where we did a Police song. We've always tried to cover songs that you wouldn't expect a heavy metal band to do, which is in fact the name of our bonus disc on the last album is comically titled "A Collection of Songs One Would Not Expect to Hear from a Progressive Metal Band." So, "Hallowed Be Thy Name" is arguably my favorite song in the world. I don't need to hear another version of that other than what Iron Maiden did. It's kind of a perfect song the way they did it.
Right.
So I don't want to just go out there and cover other hard rock and heavy metal songs that are just sort of obvious choices. So usually that'll lead us to, classic rock or even like some new wave stuff that's done in a different style. Although Depeche Mode's been sort of done to death, which is why we haven't done any of their stuff. But I had also had, I've always loved this Who song, and I know John Bush socially, and I'd always had this notion that if you're going to do that song, you have to crush the vocal because it's probably the most iconic performance in the history of rock music. And if you can't do the vocal justice, then you have no business doing the song. And there aren't many people that could do it, including, frankly, Ray, because it requires a good amount of grit and gravel, and it also requires somebody really leaning into the, emotion of the delivery, almost to the point where if you don't absolutely crush it, it's silly. But John has the grit and the gravel and the emotional will to sort of throw himself into it. And I as we were tracking, I'm like, if your voice isn't cracking, you're not trying hard enough. And that wouldn't work with Ray because that's not the style of his voice and it's not what he wants to sound like. But John gets it, and he absolutely crushes it.
Yeah, that was great. And referring to, of course, Love Reign Over Me, which we forgot to mention the title. But that's definitely one worth checking out. Going back to mentioning your, what you do as a day job and full time, you're heavily involved in technology. And I want to sort of brush that in with how does your view of the music business and the effect technology has had on it marry with what you do? Not that it's music related, but some musicians aren't open to that. But maybe you might be more to the technology that's affected, if that makes any sense. To
reframe a little bit, I'm facile with technology, but I don't really do technology. I've for many years worked in, now that I'm not there anymore, I can talk about it more freely. I worked at the Walt Disney Company and their corporate strategy and mergers and acquisitions group. So I had a hand in the acquisition of Pixar and the acquisition of Marvel and the acquisition of Lucas, as well as plotting strategies for ESPN and everything the company does. It was a fascinating place, one of the most amazing companies in the world, and of course technology is so integral to every piece of the media business that of course you get exposed to it. And so I would look at the implications of the internet on the transmission of digital content from a strategic standpoint and how it would impact Disney.
Right.
The decision to, it's so obvious now, but when we were working on it 12 years ago, it wasn't that obvious that you should be selling movies through iTunes. I think the filmed entertainment business has thus far avoided at least some of the pitfalls of what happened in the music business, because mostly they've tried to create product offerings to consumers that consumers find valuable. But I think there will continue to be pressures from technology-empowered consumers that are going to erode existing business models. So now I'm using psychobabble in an entirely different
No,
context.
I love this kind of stuff. So
let me bring it back to what I do now. I work for a company called Activision, which is a big video game company. But again, I'm not on the technology side. I'm running a film and television business that is taking our intellectual property and making movies and TV shows out of it. So in 3 years' time, when Call of Duty is a feature film, that'll be, for better or worse, you can hold me responsible for that. Hopefully it's good. So, I would say I've observed, as I just mentioned, from a sort of strategic standpoint, what the transition to digital distribution and digital content creation has imposed upon existing ways of doing business. The reality is it's inevitably going to happen, and the media and entertainment business has for years, again, to use babble, monetize the frictions between what consumers want and what they're allowed to get. A good example is in the movie business, you have what's called windowing. So you want to see Deadpool, you're going to see it, you're going to pay $14 and you're going to see it in the theater. And then 3 months later, you'll be able to watch it on pay-per-view. And then 3 months after that, you'll be able to get it on home entertainment platforms. And then 6 months after that, you can watch it on HBO. And then a year and a half after that, and maybe it makes its way to free television. But you're going to watch it when we say you're going to watch it on the device that we tell you you're going to watch it, and you're going to pay what we tell you it's priced at that time. And what technology has empowered consumers to do is say, screw you, I want this on all of my devices and I want it now, and I'm going to pay for it what I think it's worth, or I'm going to get it for nothing. And, that's simply the way of the world. So as pertains music, there's a lot less of an opportunity to make money from selling a record. And it just is what it is. There's nothing written in stone that says recording artists have a right to expect that they can be rich by releasing music. So we can either not make music, or we can release it knowing that what would have sold 200,000 records 15 years ago is going to sell 20,000 records. And, it's a bummer. I'd love to be able to have sold 200,000 records, but I'd rather sell 20,000 than nothing. And, we sort of are where we are. And it's also driven down what I'm able to accomplish in my house part-time would have cost $150,000 20 years ago in a major studio.
Right.
So, both of those things are falling. What's really happening is that any Tom, Dick, and Harry can make a record now. And there used to be a role for the labels to cultivate artists and to have a sort of farm system and bring the best ones up and let them grow over time and build their careers. And that doesn't happen anymore. And I do think that maybe it doesn't ever need to happen. What we've seen in the movie business, and people sometimes lament this, is that you have these huge blockbuster movies that everybody in the world has to see, and it's an event film. And then you've got 1,000,001 tiny little movies that find their little specialty audience, but don't really have the budget to really push filmmaking. And there's not a lot in the middle. So if I think of music, you look at who's making money on tour. It's Iron Maiden, Black Sabbath, and it's tiny little bands eking out an existence in a van going, venue to venue. Even the biggest bands in that genre, with very rare exception, they're doing okay, but they're not making a lot of money. And there's sort of nobody in between. So you can wring your hands about it, or you can realize that that's the way of doing business. And, we're never going to reach, 200,000 records a year. It's just not going to happen. But we're happy reaching our audience.
Do you think the music model right now has found itself yet, or it's still something else is coming down?
Yeah, I think it's reached its pretty close to its bottom. I mean, hardly anybody pays for anything.
Right.
And the people that do have, either an affinity for artists, or like owning physical media, or having a nostalgic attachment, as I do. I mean, there's no, leaving aside the value judgment of it, there is no denying that it used to be a more special experience I had the great pleasure of recording with Chris Poland on this record. And I remember hearing a couple of months in advance through whatever network we had at the time, because it wasn't online, that Megadeth was coming out with an album called Peace Sells What Who's Buying. And then the news sort of percolated and built in excitement until we knew that on a certain day it was going to be released. And I remember exactly where I was. I remember the record store that I went to, and I remember buying that album and going out. If memory serves, I bought that album and Somewhere in Time by Iron Maiden on the same day. I went home, and you sit in your room and you open the album up and you listen to the record 10 times in a row, and you've got the lyrics in front of you, and you memorize everything and you immerse yourself in it. And again, I'm not saying that's necessarily better or worse than it is today. Music today is completely disposable. There's so much of it, and it is so far removed from sitting down with that record and dimming your lights and just concentrating on that and learning everything.
Yeah.
It's just a different experience.
Yep.
So I think there's a little bit of that coming back, by the way, with the resurgence in vinyl, which is, I think has proven to be more than just a fad. But we'll have to see.
It's sort of like the indie movie level, I suppose, that people still like.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
But it is very cool. Listen, really, really a pleasure to speak with you, man. The album's killer. It comes out like today, like February 26th, and The Art of Loss. Good to have you guys back as a band. And again, thank you for taking some time.
Thank you. Pleasure to speak with you.
Oh, man. Bye.
All right, take care.
Thanks to Nick for the interview. We're going to close with the title track off the new album, The Art of Loss. For upcoming news and interviews, check out theprogreport.com, follow us on Facebook, at The Prog Report on Twitter, or download the podcast on iTunes. Thanks.
Sometimes it pays not to give up, but it heightens the pain if all is lost, falling totally out of reach, and I can return, so there won't be a happy ending. Is it my destiny? A fate that's designed for me? Must I accept that there isn't a happy ending? Sometimes it pays not to give up, but it heightens the pain if all is lost. We can try to insulate ourselves, but there's a truth that we can't hide unless we open up ourselves to pain. We never truly are alive. Insulate